Hey everyone, I'm Jared Greer. I'm going to talk with you today about, how do we overcome our challenges? How do we really just rise up? Because have you ever felt like you've been derailed? Like, your circumstances just go sideways, especially around things where, for months and months you've been planning, you've been preparing, you've been hoping, you've made decisions around this. What do you do? What do you do in those times where all of a sudden you just feel like you get pulled in several directions and, none of the directions really seem like a clear winner. And so you just feel kind of trapped, kind of stuck. Have you ever felt like that? Because I know I have in my own life. And, certainly it happens. We can't control our life. We can't control, our circumstances all the time. So what do we do when things just go sideways? What's the right approach? And so maybe to give you some background or some, kind of a story that I'm going to share just as a jumping off point. 2014, I started in Ironman, Maryland. I've been doing triathlons. Ironman, for those of you who aren't familiar, is a 2.4 mile swim, a 112 mile bike, and then a 26.2 mile run, so a marathon. And at this time in my life, I'd kind of been in the motion. This was my fourth one in 4 years, fifth one in 4 years, actually. And I felt ready. I felt like I was in pretty good shape. And I came off the bike, and within the first mile, I started to feel familiar pain in my knee. And it was familiar because in 2013, when I was doing Ironman Arizona, I had had some issues with my IT band, and so that caused some really significant pain in my right knee. And so whenever I would try to run, it would be like somebody stabbing me with a knife, and that's never really fun. In 2013, I knew it was going to happen, and so I had taken some painkillers on my bike with me, so that when I started the run, I could just hopefully dull some of the pain and finish my race, which I did there. So fast forward, 2014, I come off the bike. It's mile one of this marathon, and immediately my knee starts hurting, and not on the knee that I had issues with in previous years, but now my other knee that I didn't really think would even be an issue, my right knee. So here I am. I've been training for this for 7 months, really trying to get ready and really have ideally the best race of my life is what I was hoping for. But here I am. And even just jogging on it for like 30 seconds would cause this stabbing pain right in my knee. And so I was left in this place that we sometimes find ourselves, where I had spent all this time, I had these really high expectations, these really good, strong goals for myself, and I was left with, what do I do? What do I do in this moment where everything just goes sideways? And so sometimes we see these types of things play out maybe in our business, maybe at work. We, this deal that we put all this time and attention to just doesn't go through. And the income that was going to come from that, it just isn't there. And so then we feel like, wow, what do we do now? Like we just totally expected it to be there. Or maybe a promotion, that we didn't get, that we had kind of planned on, and maybe even been told, hey, you're a shoo-in. You're the right fit for the job. Or maybe our business, it takes a hit. Financially, the revenue's not there for the month or whatever it is, for the 6 months, for the quarter, for the year. And we're just left in this place of, oh my goodness, what do I do? Or maybe it's not your business, maybe it's not your professional life, maybe it's in your family. Maybe one of your kids gets sick at just a really inconvenient time. Or maybe the car breaks down. We just had to replace a battery in our van yesterday that we didn't have any anticipation that was going to happen. But, what about those times? What about, where maybe your relationship just suddenly, isn't there? Heaven forbid, the relationship ends, maybe abruptly. Or maybe it's just been bad for a long time, and it gets to a point where now it's finally calling it. And so now maybe you're left as a single parent, trying to juggle kids. Or maybe it's just in your own health, and where you've had an injury, where maybe you were getting back into fitness, getting back into getting in better shape and eating better, and you just get slapped with an injury or diagnosed with some sickness that is debilitating, that keeps you from really living the way that you want to live. So those are a couple examples. I don't know if any of those relate to you or not, but they happen, right? They happen. And so what do we do in those situations? So in my scenario, it turns out that I just decided that I was going to finish the race. I knew that there was going to be it was going to be a long day because I essentially was going to have to walk an entire marathon, which is never really fun because that's a long time. But I ended up walking the marathon, and finished it took me 6.5 hours to walk 26 miles. So 6.5 hours, not my plan, not my expectation of myself. But let me tell you what I did to be able to wrap my head around that and even feel comfortable and still confident about finishing my race. Well, I did a couple things. The first thing is, anytime we find ourselves in those situations where just things didn't turn out or aren't turning out or aren't looking like we had hoped or expected, we have to first evaluate our locus of control. That's essentially how much we depend on the internal level of control and the external level of control. Meaning, do I create my circumstances or am I created by my circumstances? So a couple of questions you can ask. What can I do to change my circumstances? In that moment with my knee, I didn't really have a lot of options. It was kind of the pain, the injury, whatever it was out of my control. So, ultimately, there's not a ton I could do to change it. But another question we can ask is, well, how can we influence our circumstances? If we can't directly have a choice and make a change, then we have to think about, well, could I have an influence on the outcomes? Could I have an influence on the circumstances? And so in that case, I could take some painkillers. I could, ask somebody for an ACE wrap or something like that, and that can influence potentially that situation. And you can do that in your family, or at work. You can think about, okay, well, if I didn't get the job, how might I be able to influence this situation or these circumstances? And maybe, it's going and talking to a colleague and trying to find out, hey, what could I be doing better? So you can influence. And then the last thing is, what action can I take? The key thing in any situation that is like this, where things just have gone sideways and you feel like you just maybe don't even want to continue or you don't know how to continue, is you just have to take some action. You have to think, what action can I take right now? What is the best action that I can take right now? Ask yourself that in any challenging situation, and the answer will be something. What is the best action that I can take? And no matter how significant, big or small, take action. So the first one was evaluating that locus of control and really kind of internalizing it and then starting to say, hey, I'm going to be the master of my circumstances. So things are going to happen, but I'm always going to then move forward. So the next step to that, after we evaluate that, is we have to redefine our intentions. So my goal for my race was certainly to finish at a much faster time. I had really high expectations. But we have to ask ourselves, what's my new goal? Now that I knew I was going to end up walking the entire marathon, my new goal was just to finish. I didn't have any expectations of time, other than the fact that the race cuts off at a certain time. So I knew that I had, a little bit of room to work with, but ultimately I needed to make sure that I was in before the finish line. So I redefined my goal. It was no longer the time that I had thought of or hoped for or even trained for. It was now something totally new. But with the new circumstances with my knee, then certainly that was different. And so that's the next question. What does success actually look like? Well, success for an able knee, for me, was a much faster time. But now success and my vision and understanding of success had to change because my knee was not broken, but it felt broken because somebody was stabbing it with knives. So I had to redefine, what does that success look like? And it looked like me moseying on through for hours and miles, walking across the finish line. And that was okay. And that's the third thing. The third thing is you got to execute. Once you redefine your intention, reestablish, think, okay, which way am I going to go? How am I going to go there? Then you've got to execute. And that takes a couple things. You've got to stay positive. You ultimately really have to just be accepting of your new criteria of success, your new definition of success. And so the other thing is you have to forget. You have to forget about before. You have to forget about the expectation that you had. You just have to let it go. Because if you dwell on it, then any accomplishment that comes with your new version of success, it just won't be enough. So I finished that day knowing that I had accomplished my goal. Did my goal change? Totally did. I had totally different expectations for myself in that race. I had hoped for more and hoped for different. But at the end of the day, I look at that as a celebration. It was my slowest race overall. It's been my slowest marathon to date. But I finished. And I finished according to my goals given the circumstances and situations that we're in. So whether it's your family situation or your health situation or your business situation, if you're feeling like you're stressed, if you're feeling like you're challenged, if you're feeling like you don't know which way to go, or maybe you feel like the only options are just painstaking and the outcomes or the realization of those goals are just going to be minimal, have some courage, have some faith, and be so proud and thrilled that you're continuing on the journey, that you're continuing on the path. Notice none of my steps involve quitting. Don't quit. Keep going. You're always going to learn something. You're always going to uncover new opportunity, or ultimately you're going to realize success. So keep on keeping on, as they say. Don't be worried about how far you have to go. Be thrilled with how far you've come.